All right, good evening. Welcome to the Denver Elections Division. I'm Alton Dillard, Communications Manager. Filling in for our clerk and recorder, the Honorable Paul Lopez is unfortunately a little under the weather, but with us in spirit and definitely down with the cause. So what we're here to talk about tonight is the Confined Voter Program and the partnership in which that entails. So I'm going to give you a quick bit of history, then I'll kick it over to Stuart Clubb, who's one of our panelists. January 21st, 2016, we had a meeting with Christy, Pam, and Justin from the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. They wanted to talk about confined voting. And we're like, sure, eligible voters need to be able to participate. You know, we're set up with the sheriffs that we take the ballots and they get distributed. And they're like, nah, we can take a deeper dive than that. We actually want a little more active participation. Now, 5, 6, 7 years on, this program has become a national model. So I'm going to kick it over real quick to Stuart Clubb, who's going to give us a little bit of history, and then we'll introduce you to the other panelists. Stuart Clubb from the Denver Elections Division.
Thank you, Alton. As Alton mentioned, we really started our outreach and registration events in 2016. Voting in jail had always been around since then, but not a lot of education was around it. We found that first going into the facilities that you couldn't just hand a registration form to someone and expect them to know how to fill it out. So education, knowing their eligibility and methods in which they could get a ballot and vote it and return it was one of our first hurdles, was just educating the population there. And then I'll talk later in this panel about how some of the best practices that we've found and some of the best procedures that we've come across in the years that we've been doing this. But one of the things that we found out when we first started this program is it was essential not to just do it ourselves as an elections division or sheriff's department, but to bring in other agencies and other volunteers to help us with this community project. So I'm going to kick it over to our panelist, Ann Duncan from the League of Women Voters.
All right, thank you. The League of Women Voters is 100 years old last year, and its whole mission is access to voting and expanding access to voting, and also voter education. So it's really an obvious choice. The League is completely nonpartisan, even though many of us are interested in politics. We don't let that intrude into our voter registration and voter education activities. Last year during the pandemic, we trained over 90 people to do voter registration all over the city. We especially look for places where there are pockets of people who aren't registered. Colorado has such a high rate of registration that it's not always easy to find those folks. But one of the places that they do exist is in the jails. So about 2 years ago, we got in touch with CCJRC and asked if we could help. And we've been doing that since then. We go into the jails usually with an elections division person and 2 or 3 of our volunteers who have been trained both by us and by the jail staff. And we let people know whether they can vote or not, whether they're eligible. We don't want to get anyone in trouble by registering ineligible voters, because that's not good. But a lot of folks in jails are eligible to vote. If they're serving a current felony term, no. But otherwise, if they're on a misdemeanor, there are a lot of people in jail who haven't been convicted of anything. They're pre-trial, or they're just there for a few days being held, and then they'll be let go. And so those people are eligible to vote, and we want them to have a voice. We think it's really important to have community volunteers do this work because it connects people with the community. And that's an important thing. They're all going to be out sooner or later. And we want them to feel like they're a part of the city and the state and the nation. And we think it's good for them to have a voice. We have a different perspective. And there are many political opinions in the jails. They'll tell us we don't say anything, even though sometimes they're trying to get us to. If it weren't for the support of the sheriff's office and the and Denver elections, we couldn't do this. But it's actually a lot of fun, and people are appreciative. The first time I ever went in was the first time I had ever set foot in a jail. It does kind of freak you out when you hear that door close, but after that time, it's pretty comfortable. We feel safe. There's always a deputy with us, and we feel like we're doing some real good in the world. So.
And you bring up a good topic there, that this population is something that we wanted to address. We were waiting actually for one more of our panelists that got caught up in traffic, but Justin Cooper from CCJRC will be talking to us about the population, why it's important to address them as well, and why we think it's important to have volunteers as well. Not only that they need to be doing the work, but also during election time, a lot of us election employees are doing the work here at the office. So the volunteers have become a crucial part of our programs. You do make a good point. We have two facilities here in Denver, both DDC and county. The downtown detention center, most people going in there have not even seen a judge yet. So there's a lot of pretrial detainees that are eligible for this program. But that kind of crosses over to our facilities and having access and safety while we're there.
Yep. So before we introduce our next panelist, also just a couple of quick housekeeping things. If you need closed captioning, look in your settings or look for the caption button. And also, in case you missed the start of the meeting, this meeting is being recorded. Okay, so we'll be able to still see it. All right, so our next speaker here will be Andrew Jones from the Denver Sheriff's Department. And again, like we've talked about with this whole confined voter concept, it's all about the partnerships. And so as someone who was in on those preliminary meetings, you all's open door through the various levels of command and everything was very impressive.
Well, thank you. We certainly appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. I'm with the Denver Sheriff Department. Part of our responsibility in the programs unit, which I'm a part of as well as a program administrator, is transition services for offenders, or what we refer to as inmates. In those situations, we want to make sure that the inmate or the offender is in a position where they are connected to the community as much as possible, because to everyone's point here, they will be returning back to the community at large. So we want to make sure that they are comfortable knowing that they still have a connection, that they are still connected to services and are a part of society moving forward. Part of that is we have to make sure that we are collaborating with as many community partners as we possibly can. In this case, with this particular project, it worked out very well in the sense that we've had the great opportunity of working with the elections and also CCJRC and the League of Women's Voters. That being said, that helps us allow the inmates to stay connected to the community at large moving forward. Part of that, in order for it to be a success, is to make sure that the safety and security of the actual program and all the people involved is very much top notch. So what that involves is very simple for all intents and purposes. Now, if you're working from another agency, which we're looking to make sure that is spread throughout the country, if at all possible, and it's to a large degree, I'm sure it's already moving in that direction. You just have to make sure that you have everyone accounted for. First and foremost, the training that takes place, elections has their training with individuals to make sure that they understand all the ins and outs of the laws associated with elections and voting, who's eligible, so on and so forth. We, as far as the Denver Sheriff Department staff, was involved with that as well, being from the program's team. That way we know exactly what's being said, and we're comfortable if we have to field questions at a later time as well. We do try to refer to our colleagues here, but we also like to make sure, again, that we have a basic knowledge so that, we always get a straggler or two who has a curious question, and they may feel more comfortable with our staff because we work with them on a regular basis. We also have our own personable or set training for just knowing the security of the actual area. Now, security doesn't just have to do with physical characteristics, it has to do with the emotional and mental aspect of things as well. We do a holistic approach when it comes to people. We have a very vulnerable population. Some people may think, based on TV and things of that nature, that things are rough and tumble, and these guys are hardcore, and the ladies are fighting, and everything, it's all chaos. That's not the case at all. These are individuals that sometimes just cannot navigate things the way that we do on a regular basis because they may not have the education, or they may just have, some circumstance that doesn't allow them to track according to quote unquote normal standards, so to speak. So what we like to do is make sure the safety and security piece is not only physical, but also emotional and mental. So we make sure that we vet all of the individuals who are going to be participating in this respective program, for example, with the voting, just to ensure that we're not going to have anything that will cause a disturbance to the actual inmate or safety concern of anything of that nature. So it's just about a 2-hour orientation / training to where everyone is brought up to par, some of the caveats associated with jails, nuances, things of that nature. And again, there's always staff members that are going to be with them and with us, whether it's uniformed staff or, for example, myself as a program administrator in the Sheriff Department employee. So that part of it is covered very well. So again, we vet all the individuals that are coming in throughout the whole process. When we're walking through the facilities, we make sure that questions are being answered. We do things in an orderly fashion. We give very clear instructions to where people are to stand, so to speak, or for example, because the inmates, they want to know the information. They want to know what's going on, what's this about, so on and so forth. So we just want to make sure it's orderly so that not so much just because we're worried about anything, it's just so if things are a little bit more calm and quiet, then those people who don't quite track very well or get a little anxious with these types of things, they can hear it a little bit more clear and they actually see what's taking place and they're more comfortable. So that's a part of the security piece overall. We also have a debrief. That way, after the fact, if something else comes up, we can say, hey, how can we do this better moving forward? Because this is an ongoing project. It is not something that is just one time for a particular election. It moves forward from there, and we look forward to future endeavors with this team.
Yeah, you make a really good point about the partnership. And speaking of the partnership, you've been joined by Justin Cooper. And Justin, I took the audience back into the Wayback Machine back into January of 2016 for our official first sit down with yourself and Pam and Christy.
Yes.
And so we really want to hear from our partners at the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition, who not only on the municipal things, y'all are making things happen at the state level too. So take it away, Justin.
Oh, thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. Man, 2016. It feels like it was yesterday, relatively speaking, right? When we all started this. And I'm excited to be with the audience and the community this evening. I'm Justin Cooper, Deputy Director of the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. And please pardon my tardiness, but I'm excited to be with you this evening and just have this conversation, right, with community about how this project got started. And you're right, Alton, in 2016, CCJRC, folks, if you're not aware, our organization has been around since 1999 doing criminal justice reform, really focused on any mass incarceration or eliminating the overuse of the criminal justice system in advance of community health and safety. But more importantly, we've been the only criminal justice advocacy organization really focused on civic engagement and voting in our state, right? Because unbeknownst to a lot of people in the state, they didn't know that Colorado does not practice permanent disenfranchisement. And so once we've learned that, actually back in 2006, we piloted a small program, really just educating community on their rights, especially if they was involved in the criminal legal system. And was fortunate to do that work over a period of time. And leading up to 2016, we discovered, looking at the eligible population in our state that's able to vote with a criminal record. And we just had an aha moment. We're like, well, wait a minute. Folks who are confined in jail, right, are relatively a certain population of folks are eligible to register to vote and vote, right? Folks that are on pretrial, containment, you guys probably already talked about that eligibility criteria and stuff like that. And so when we had that moment, it was like, hey, let's reach in to the Denver Elections Division, let's reach into the Denver Sheriff's Department and just facilitate a conversation and say, is there anything we can do to get this information on the inside to folks who are eligible? And that was really the impetus at that point in 2016. We went over several meetings, I believe, where we started talking about not only is it an opportunity to get the education inside, but there's actually an opportunity to do voter registration. And so through the leadership of DSD and the leadership of DED, Denver Elections Division, we were able to put together, a protocol, really a demonstration pilot project. And we piloted this effort in 2016 for the first time during a municipal election. It was a local election and yielded some promising results. In fact, we had a 37% turnout of the folks in jail at the time that actually voted in that local election. And I believe, don't quote me on the stats, but relative around that time in 2016, which actually really was a presidential election, right? The turnout rate for the city and county of Denver was like around 30% or 33%, somewhere roughly around in there, right? So we had kind of exceeded the expectations and really saw the response from the folks on the inside actually having access to this information, having access to the opportunity to register to vote. And from that point, the momentum was built. And, here we are in 2021, with the opportunity and the privilege to share with the community and folks across the state how they can endeavor on a project like this. So we were excited to be a part of it. And, our intention and mission was really to scale the information out there in the state of Colorado, myth bust with people who thought that they couldn't vote if they had a criminal record, because it's not true in our state. And we realized literally the population of people, if they knew and participated in the elections, how effective that would be for our democracy. An example of that is, we have a probation system in Colorado, right? There's approximately around 80,000 people who are under state supervision and probation. All of them are eligible to vote, right? And so when we started looking at the jail population, we were fortunate, Denver being who we are, right? Denver said, hey, let's explore this. We want to step into this and try this. And like I said, here we are today. So great question, just proud to be a part of the process.
All right, good to hear from you. And now, Stewart Clubb. Stewart Clubb has been, not only the person who's been on point from the Denver Elections Division, he has really gone, to quote Brother Jeff, he's 10 toes in when it comes to this kind of work. And we're just so proud of Stu and his open door policy and his willingness to work with the community. So I'm going to turn it over to Stu. You can give us a little more perspective and talk about how the program has evolved, et cetera.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's kind of my turn to talk about how we actually did it. So like we said, we've had some partners throughout this whole journey, and I don't think any of it would have been possible just me doing it by myself. So I want to thank the group as a whole, because this document that we've created that we're sharing today, these are all the hurdles that we've had to overcome. And those adopting this program or going out there and trying this, you don't have to invent the wheel yourself. Take it from where we've gone, and we found some cool things along the way. So as we mentioned, in 2016, we started back then, and we found right away quickly that you can't just hand a registration form to someone. You need to go do education. Our message got a little long in the pods in the first, so we learned to streamline, and we laughed because, it became a long day as well in the jail too, and you've got to keep that attention going with your message. We learned to get our message down to streamline. We tried at one point splitting it up into two groups and having one group go in and do the education and then the other group do the registration. We found that was very taxing on our facilities and logistics. We actually found a smaller group and streamlined message can be very efficient. We can actually give that message and do registration almost at the same time. We brought in the Legal Women Voters and we got bilingual. We could do Spanish translations and help with Spanish native speakers. We found time of day was interesting. If you go in early enough, you can get some good attention without a whole lot of distraction. But if you go too early, we might get some bad attitude. So little things like that. We also, yeah, so that was a big part of our education was streamlining that message, finding the information that the potential voter needed to hear. And then we also, CCGRC put together some palm cards for us that we could leave in the pods. A lot of the times only half the pod would be out, so we could only talk to the people out there, and then you'd have to shout into the pods that were closed, and you'd have to pretty much tell them, we're going to leave some information here for you. If you have any questions, please contact your program administrator. So yeah, we found also to doing periodic visits as well, and not just doing one visit right before election day because you have a lot of questions. But doing monthly visits has been great to get that education up, and so people, it becomes kind of a normal thing in the jail as well. Another thing we found was accessibility to IDs. So we actually come across a lot of people who have never voted before, and this is probably their first opportunity where someone has come up to them and said, hey, do you want to register to vote? So we do get new registrations, and one of the hurdles we had to overcome was having an ID for these individuals. We ended up working with the jail, and there was a bill passed in 2019, right? House Bill 19-1266, in which we were able to create a new form of identification specifically for these individuals confined, in which the jail administrator can give us the information we need to get them registered to vote, and the voter doesn't even have to deal with that aspect of it. We were finding it was very hard for them to get into their personal items that were locked up, and even if they did have an acceptable form of ID, was struggling. So that was one of the things we found in 2019 to help streamline our process. Another thing we found too is as we're registering inmates to vote, adding in their jail ID with that as well, adding it into our voter registration as part of their name, or part of the address, I should say, that we're mailing to identify them. Luckily, with our system, we can mail to one PO box. And I should mention that Colorado, we have the convenience of being an all mail ballot state. So being able to send an inmate their ballot through the mail and have them vote it and send it back through the mail has been very convenient for our model and for what we want to do. We are able to create replacement ballots and send those in, but it is hard to do a registration on the spot and create a replacement ballot, but I'll come back to that here in just a second. Yeah, and I should say, yeah, delivery and pickup have been great as far as our mail model. I do an election day pickup to make sure we're not leaving anything in the jails. And then if we go over kind of to the future, in-person voting was a very new thing for us that we did in November of this last year. So for the last presidential election, due to COVID restricting us from doing our normal visits and it being a large election year, we got some permissions from the Sheriff's Department to bring in all our equipment, which usually is a large amount of contraband. Usually they don't like anything that connects to the internet or has too many cables or involved things, but we were able to bring in the necessary equipment that we needed. So we did our normal mail ballots and delivery as much as we could, but to service the voters that we couldn't necessarily visit because of COVID or do our quick back and forth that we normally can with the jail administrator, we had to just go in and create a VSBC for these individuals. And there were some lessons learned in that process as well, as far as logistics, time it takes. A big hurdle that we're starting to find is just information for the voters about what's on the ballot. Us being volunteers and an elections division, and we want to be as bipartisan, as neutral as possible, but we also want to have good, well-informed voters. So getting them the information that they need to make good, informed decisions on their ballot has been a bit of a hurdle, struggle, something for us in the future to figure out. But yeah, so a lot of these things we've kind of found just throughout the years of doing this, and we've found our best practices, and this is a big reason why we wanted to write this down and put it somewhere. So we weren't the only ones holding on to this information. We know that there's a lot of initiatives going across the country right now to bolster their programs if they already have some, or even just to begin them. So we want to share this document. We don't want people to do the same hurdles that we had to do. Perhaps that if there is something written to that, they might find that there's better access to facilities or to these individuals. So we kind of want to keep this document alive, but we all want to share it. We're going to continue to add our best practices to this document, but we do want to share it out. And we know that there's been a lot of attention from media across the nation, and it's to continue to share that and show off a little bit, and yeah, continue to share. So that's why we're here today, and that's why we're doing this. So.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead, you'll go here, then we also have a couple of questions from the chat. Go ahead.
Super sweet. And all of them, I just want to piggyback on what Stuart was saying. I think it's important too for folks to know in reference to the in-person voting that we were able to do in 2020 election, and it's extremely significant. And the context behind it, I think we'd be remiss not to acknowledge the leadership in Denver that allowed that to happen, right? Under the leadership of Sheriff Elias Diggins, I remember preliminary conversations with him, preliminary conversations with the Secretary of State's office, preliminary conversations with Clerk and Recorder Lopez about what would it look like to do in-person voting. And to be honest, you guys, there really wasn't a real blueprint out there for that. In fact, Denver, this particular initiative and project, we were considered the third in the country to do this, right? And so I just didn't want to underplay the fact that, we definitely took a risk and watched this project evolve from 2016, from voter education to voter registration to actual in-person voting in the jail, right? And I think that, our lessons learned and us having the opportunity to be able to share this with communities, share this with folks, share this document with folks and across the country. If our model can serve as a blueprint or support to others who want to do this, is vitally important. We're seeing the ongoing national debate, especially coming off of this last election cycle, around voter access, voter suppression, voter inclusion, and really tackling the equity and race things that are happening with voting in our country. And so, I'm really proud, right, of the opportunity that we've had over this last couple of years to develop all three stages. Denver, the Denver Sheriff's Department, and that leadership being the model, right, in Colorado to really pioneer this. And other counties in our state are interested in moving forward with a very similar model. And so this is important. Colorado is revered as one of the states that has, a primary model around our voting system, period, right? And I think we're coming 1 inch closer to full reenfranchisement and making sure that folks involved in the criminal legal system who have a constitutional right, and a civil right to vote actually be able to participate in democracy in our state. So I just appreciate you bringing that up, Stuart, because the in-person voting, without the leadership and the help of the Denver Sheriff's Division, other community partners like the League of Women Voters, really putting that infrastructure in place. And it was a pilot, right? It was a demonstration. It was the first time we've done it, but I think that is made a path forward for other county jails to consider doing the same and increasing, our voter system overall. So thank you for bringing that up.
Good, thank you, Stu.
And for us to do it better too. Stu mentioned information about issues and candidates. That's a challenge that we're really working on now. The league publishes books on the ballot issues that are neutral, but give information about the issue and then both the pro and con arguments. And we do distribute those in the jails. And those, I think, have been pretty helpful because they're more accessible for most people than the very lengthy and illegal language blue book for the state issues and the white book for the Denver ones. But the real challenge now, in addition to maybe even getting more information on ballot issues, is candidate information, because so much of that now is on the internet.
Yep.
And they do not have internet access. So we are working on ways that we can get candidate information to people without being partisan in any way. So what the league does in general is a website called Vote 411, and we send questions to all the candidates, give them a link that's only theirs, and they enter their own answers and their own information. And we're trying to figure out a way that we can get that to the incarcerated voters. It's a challenge, but I think we can do it. The other thing that we're thinking about is some kind of mini civics class, because these voters, many of them, as Stu said, and as others have also said, these are, many of them, first-time voters. They haven't ever seen a ballot before, and the ballots are long in Colorado because of the ballot issues. And so we were finding when we did in-person voting that you can't allow people to sit at the machine and read the ballot issue because it may take 45 minutes and we don't have that kind of time. So education is our next hurdle, I would say.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's so cool about this discussion is the real talk. Yes, we've talked about the successes, but we're still also honest about the challenges, honest about the risks, because, you know, in government, there's a tendency to be risk averse. But, you know, what hill to die on other than democracy? By making sure that people who are eligible voters, that's a message we always hammer, eligible voters are able to participate. So let's get to some of the questions in the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to direct them to Stu, and then Stu can pop them to the other SMEs for a deeper dive on this. But the first question, Stu, is how can people volunteer?
Great question. Always looking for volunteers in elections in general to help us run our elections. I would say by contacting, let's start with League of Women Voters and CCJRC. Those are two agencies that we've worked with in the past. We know they have brought us some great volunteers in the past. Some things to note is we do background checks as an elections division and also as the Sheriff's Department. And we do trainings for registration, and we also do trainings for safety trainings going through the jail. So it's not just you can volunteer and start tomorrow. We'll have to get you into some classes, but yeah, contact the elections division. Contact me. Contact CCJRC. Contact League of Women Voters. We'd be happy to help you. We'd love to take it.
All right, and before we wrap, we've got still like 25 minutes, just to make sure to share whatever contact information you have. And this, you sort of already answered this, but also, you know, got some questions about who are the community partners. Do we have any outside of who's already joining us at the table? Anyone else expressing interest? Have you heard from anybody?
Well, it started with CCJRC, Criminal Justice Reform Coalition, with the Sheriff's Department, kind of came to us, the Elections Division, and we added the League of Women Voters 2019.
I think so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that's the only agencies, you've brought us volunteers and then you've had election judges.
As far as organizational partners, I think CCJRC and the League of Women Voters have been the primary organizational partners. Our organization we've been reached in by other organizations like the NAACP, has offered volunteers that we've had participate in the effort. There's several other kind of grassroots organizations that have participated as far as volunteers through CCJRC and partnering with us to be able to come in and do this effort. So yeah, but the primary community-based organizations that have really been participating in this has been called CCJRC and the League of Women Voters. But there's several partners out there that have been extremely interested in doing this. We've actually had volunteers from the Second Chance Center, which is a reentry organization that is located in Aurora, ran by Hassan Latif. We've had volunteers of those folks coming in. And to Stuart's point, you know, CCJRC, we run a full volunteer program. We also train all of our volunteers on the rights and the voting rights in this particular program. We actually don't do a criminal background check or background check in that regard, but for this particular program, they volunteers are thoroughly vetted through the Denver Elections Division and also the Denver Sheriff's Department as well. So we encourage volunteers to come to us regardless of their background. We do the vetting piece, but we partner with other organizations that have supported the effort for sure.
We also have, just the overall, we have to make mention of the fact that we have so many supporting agencies outside of just this group here as well. Because even if they're not directly involved in terms of volunteering individuals or being initially a part of the elections portion of it, just the support of saying, hey, you guys are doing this really good, great project. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for making sure that these people are involved and whatnot. And that support in itself actually kind of helps stir things a little bit more as well. Because again, if it wasn't for certain government officials, things of that nature, things like this wouldn't get off the ground. So with the Denver Sheriff Department, for example, we can't do anything without volunteer support, right? And not only volunteers, but just the community at large. So we oftentimes will get, feedback from other agencies, Servicio de la Raza, they say, yes, you guys are doing a great job. You were talking about Second Chance Center and DICP, Denver Inner City Parish. I mean, just everyone will come along and say, hey, you guys are doing this great thing. So that kind of helps catalyze things moving forward as well.
Well, Andrew, it's safe to say too, the leadership of the city, right? The manager of safety,
Absolutely.
right? Back in 2016, at that time, it was Stephanie O'Malley who greenlighted this, and now Murphy Robinson now in those roles, the mayor supporting this, right? So there's others that have definitely contributed to from 2016 to now, and the city leadership has allowed this project to happen.
And this is again why we're looking at this as a national model, and we do have a white paper. All righty, so we have another question. This is sort of a more technical question around registration and eligibility. So by virtue of being incarcerated in the Denver jail, is an applicant guaranteed to satisfy any residency requirements for registration, or do you have to independently verify residency? And is the voter's address of record for voting purposes always the jail, regardless of the duration of their confinement?
Good question.
Great question.
We hear this question a lot.
Yeah.
So you need residency before being confined in the jail. Being at a Denver jail or Colorado jail does not give you Colorado residency. So if you come in from out of state, you've been here for a couple days and you have to go to the jail and you're there for the 22 days there in jail, that does not give you Colorado residency. You have to have been in Colorado for 22 days prior to being confined in the jail. Also, we can only do residential addresses for registering to vote. We can mail your ballot to any place, and we do mail ballots to the PO box for the jail for if the inmate does request their ballot at the jail. But that has to be, they cannot use the jail as their Denver residency or Colorado residential address. That has to be the address they were at prior to being confined. If they were homeless or did not have a house, but we can do a cross street that they identify with to get their ballot styled.
And we do run into that quite a lot, yes, with the jail population.
Yep. The next question from the chat, and I'm going to again start with Stu, but I think everyone can chime in on this one. How can other counties or states get involved with this type of program?
Contact your elections division.
And your sheriff's
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
It really requires the support of both those agencies.
I think there's a due diligence that folks, especially if you're in a different state and you're interested in doing a project like this, right? You want to know the laws of your state because the voting laws vary state by state.
Yes.
And then once you have a full understanding of what your state's laws are, exactly what the panel was saying is you want to first reach out to your local elections division, especially if it's here in Colorado, and also your local sheriff's department, depending on what your system is in the state that you reside, right? Because states have different sheriff systems as well, right? For example, in southern states, a lot of the sheriff's department has patrol responsibility legislated and mandated by law. So they serve as both. So you want to do that level of due diligence. You want to do your get ready, As far as here in Colorado, I believe you guys, and we actually have a couple of other counties right now that are interested in pioneering, piloting a program like this. So the second thing that you can do is get this white paper. Right, so it gives you kind of really that practical, logistical, fundamental ways of putting a program like this together, I would say. But the most important thing is to know the laws. Know the laws in your state, know exactly what the voting rights are, build relationships with your elections division. If you're an advocacy or a community-based organization, it's really important to build those relationships and establish that in the beginning. Especially even if you're in an advocacy or activist role in your community, it's important where community relationships with local law enforcement is what allows a program like this to happen, right? So I would encourage, and I'm speaking to the nuances, right? We can give you kind of the mechanical way of how to get a program like this started. But the nuance matters, ladies and gentlemen, and relationship matters. And there's times that, you can be on, the opposite side of an issue when it comes to local law enforcement, or you can be in partnership with local law enforcement. So I encourage you to really consider that nuance in order to do a program like this. I'll stop there, but I just wanted to highlight those nuances.
The whole reason we're doing this is to break the ice
Yeah.
for you. You're not going to be the first, so yeah, we're trying to do the hard stuff for you. So get out there.
Exercise a lot of patience. When you're dealing with a secured environment, the first thing you're going to ask is, how does this benefit us, right? You're dealing with, a population that's disenfranchised. People don't really think they should exist in many instances, which is unfortunate. They're still a part of society. They're still going to be coming in. They're going to be standing next to you in line at Walmart. They're going to stand next to you in line in King Soopers. So, you need to just make sure that they're a part of this all, right? So patience is a big virtue. Like you said, communication is big. Marketing and advertisement doesn't hurt. And one of the key things, and just kind of coincides with what we were talking about earlier, is bipartisan. As part of the education and information piece, we as staff, when you're in the jail, not only does this team have to be bipartisan, but we as Denver Sheriff Department staff have to be bipartisan as well. Because if we try to give any sort of influence or anything like that on the people that we're serving, that could cause an issue, right? They could blame us for, oh, so-and-so got elected, it's your fault, that kind of thing. We don't want to muddy the waters or anything. We just try to keep it very straightforward and simple. We ask that if you have a specific question or what have you, ask members of the team who are about elections and whatnot, and we just keep it straight across board. Because if our deputies that are working with this team are doing the same thing, and we as program staff are doing the same thing, or whatever agencies out there that's looking to do this, that'll go a long way. And it's integrity of the system, for one. And then two, the people that are unfortunately in this position, they respect you more. So it's because you're not trying to influence them, which is oftentimes what has taken place previously. That kind of leads to their current situation.
Gotcha. I got a question from the chat, actually, that I think you'll be the one who would be good to answer. It's a two-parter, so it's sort of for the crew, but then they also want to mine down on some jail-specific things. So first part of the question, how interested do you find the inmates being in voting? And the second part is if we could talk a little bit more about sort of the safety preparations for when you do have civilians in the pot.
That's a very good question. Everybody's smiling. It's a very, very, very good, it's a positive thing. I mean, everyone wants to get involved with it. And I say everyone because it's one of those things where the jail is a very interesting environment because people want to belong, okay? So what ends up happening is you may get a few people that are quite grumpy, so to speak, and they're like, oh, you guys are making this noise, you're coming in, you're causing all this ruckus, you're talking about this stuff, we don't even know what it's about. But as we move forward, you notice that people get more and more involved and they want to know kind of what's going on and figure things out. They are very interested in learning, for one, in the education piece, and the fact that you're taking the time to actually come out there, that are connecting to people from the outside community. And they're like, these people are actually taking their time to come in and speak to us when everyone else just kind of, blew us off and didn't think we existed, right? So the turnout is really strong, really solid. When it comes to registration forms and whatnot, we get stacks of them. And it's not unusual for when the team leaves, we're still getting it. We're still getting it. We have a system where we can get, the ballots or any type of mail back to our particular unit in this case. And we field numbers of them. And I often will call, Mr. Club and say, hey, you got to come and pick these up. I can, we're getting them and we do, we keep track of them. And the interest is very high. very high. Even for people who are first-time voters, and they will tell you, I'm in my 60s and I've never voted ever in my life. But for some reason, I want to do it now because you guys have reached out, you've educated us, and I'm interested. And they may have never thought about it because no one ever kind of walked them through it.
The only thing I'll add to that is in 2016, when we completed the first round of voter registration, we actually got a standing ovation from the inmates. Wow. And it was one of those moments that reflected that they are extremely interested, they engaged, and contrary to popular belief, they actually track voter registration and politics much more than people anticipated. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons learned to the question of how interested were people inside, is because the lesson learned was, the presumption that they did not know is a mistake, right? And we found that to be true in 2016 in the first pilot of this. And so I just wanted to add that piece because I thought the reception worked really well. But a lot of the interest to the audience's question around how interested were people had a lot to do with the earlier prep that the Denver Sheriff's Division did. In fact, Mr. Jones was really being adamant about getting information in ahead of time. So they were very receptive once we started the program because Mr. Jones and his crew had started already prepping and doing the voter education ahead of time. So the interest was there. They were tracking. They were engaged. And I think that was vitally important. And one other nuance that I think is important to that question, and I'll stop there, is part of the interest too in having organizations that really work with the population is the relationship piece. We were trusted messengers, trusted sources coming in, right? Because of the work of my organization, working with this particular population around reform. And that's really important for the audience member that asked that question around interest, because that relationship mattered in engaging their interest. It made them more engaged. They were familiar with the organization, my organization, because of the work that we do. And there was somewhat of a relative trust already there. So that I think that assisted with the interest as well. But it was well received to that particular latter part of the question.
Yeah.
Okay, and then back to the other part of the question, and maybe
talk-
we can talk operationally, maybe not getting down into tactical, but
Oh, yeah.
again, we got, civilians coming in. What-
Yeah, just before I do that real quick, the one thing that you and this group helped do was combat that fear that an individual has. Because it's the fear, not that they didn't want to vote on the outside, but they were afraid because they didn't know the information. They didn't have anyone who could kind of walk them through it. So that's kind of how the barrier got broken down with just this type of program and what have you. As far as the security aspect, believe it or not, it's a very simple concept. It's common sense. Really, it's common sense. The individuals that we deal with on a regular basis are no different to anyone that's out on the streets. Okay, the only difference is they can't just leave when they choose to. So common respect is one, which is a part of security. I mean, it honestly is. The reason why this was so successful is because of the fact that we were respectful of the individuals. Everyone in here, the training was not so much to be like, okay, you gotta worry about this, you gotta worry about that. It's more of how do you interact? How do you speak to these individuals? Because again, they understand that there's a respect level involved, right?
Yes.
We as DSD staff, we're naturally going to handle the security things. I always say this is where all my gray hair comes from because I'm watching everything.
Right.
I'm having a conversation with you all, but I'm paying attention to what he's doing over my left shoulder here. I'm watching what they're doing over there, and it's just one of those things that we naturally do. The way that we overcome all of the security concerns is just the education piece. And I know it sounds, like a redundant wheel, but it is very much just the education. Again, we go and we sit in on their education as far as voting is concerned, and then they come to us and they say, this is how you interact with the inmates. This is what you look out for in the case of emergency, do this, and it's just very simple things, right? And then we just go from there. The rest, we do have deputies on duty that walk with us, and that are just as much of a resource as the teammates because they get educated as well. But then we as DSD staff, we're watching everything and we'll say, we're spending a lot of time here, let's move on. Or if let's say there's an individual who's just kind of buying time and wants to kind of, hey, can we take a little time? That's when we'll step in and say, hey, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, we understand where you're coming from, but I will come back and talk to you later on, thus and so, right? So again, it may sound like, oh, you guys got all these security things to worry about, and there's mace and there's this. No, it's not even like that. It is simply how you interact with that individual. Shake his hand, shake her hand. Hey, I'm here to help you out with this. Do you have any questions for me? And then when you're giving the broad presentation, to Mr. Grubb's point, just got to have that voice. You have to have that confidence and that voice inflection, because they're looking at us as the experts, right? And that's all it is. And for anyone who say there's another security agency or jurisdiction who wants to reach out or whatever, of course we can cover that behind the scenes, if you will, because they obviously know it. But there's always, again, nuances, especially when it comes to this type of information.
Cool. So one more quick question, then we still have a few more minutes, but we also got a question in the chat about how many hours are required to volunteer. So if someone wanted to participate in this, how much of a carve out would they have to do based on your various experience?
With the 2 facilities, we try to go once a month to each facility, and it's an entire day at the facility, 7 a.m. to at least 3 p.m. And that takes about that long to get through the facility. That being said, so 2 days a month, and then as far as the training, once you have trained with us, I'd say you're pretty good to go. After you've taken our registration training and then the annual safety training, you have to do that every year. And then we do a little kind of refresher right before we go into the facilities on just registration, what we're looking for. So I'd say other than going through the facilities, that time commitment, it's a little bit of training.
The CCJRC, I'd say our volunteer program is ran by our coordinator, Jasmine Ross. And we have a standard requirement with a project like that. We ask for volunteers to at least commit to 4 hours, right? Like to Stuart's point, for this particular project, it's all day. And so we like to stay consistent with our volunteers. So we ask for 4-hour commitments to this particular project if they want to volunteer through our organization. We let them know the frequency. Right. So for example, like Stuart highlighted, if it's once a month or if it's twice a month, we're at 2 facilities, usually all day at each facility. That would roughly average around 8 hours of volunteer time. And that's just actually doing the actual program itself. Like I mentioned earlier, our volunteer coordinator runs, Jasmine Ross, she runs a full training for our volunteers. So that training is on average about 2 hours. Right. So with a project like this, if you're volunteering through CCJRC, based upon the frequency in which we get the opportunity to go into the jails, we ask volunteers to at least anticipate committing about 10 hours of volunteer time to a project like this.
Okay.
And that's pretty similar for the league as well. We do 2-hour training sessions for voter registration in general. And then to go into the jails on top of that, you need the jail training, which is 2.5 hours. And they're both every year. So and then it doesn't make sense to go for 5 minutes. If you put in that kind of training time, then you're going to want to stay for the day. And often we're out by 2.
And it may sound tedious, but quite honestly, we have a good time.
We
the time flows. It's really a good time for.
It's a fun group.
We have a good time with it. And it's not tedious.
We get the most interesting questions in the jails. You just never know. It is a challenge, and we really learn quite a lot about the nuances of the laws relating to who is eligible to vote and who may not be. But that's part of the fun of it.
So bring some good walking shoes.
Yes, bring good walking shoes. Those floors are
The floors are hard.
All right, got about 5 minutes left here. And as I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded, but there's a lot of interest again in the information that can get to inmates around ballot issues and candidates. I know we kind of touched upon it. And one thing I always want to mention is there's a change in law within the past couple of years. So now any ballot question in the city and county of Denver gets the same kind of treatment that the state Tabor notice gets. So even if the question does not affect debt or taxes, People do have the ability to read the full legislative language, the enacting clauses, the whereins, the there is, all that's there for them on each and every question. But as Ann talked about earlier, they also have some things that they do, and then we'll wrap up with how to get to the white paper.
Okay, well, the League of Women Voters, the state league, does research on all the ballot questions and gives us short summary, the background, why people are proposing this. We talked to the people who are supporting it and list their reasons for supporting it and why they think others should. And we talk to opponents and get from them why they think people shouldn't support it. We don't make recommendations. We just give this flat out information in a briefer and readable format, which is, I have to say, in the jails, that is really important because there are a lot of folks there who are, I would say, limited in reading ability.
And I should also mention too, as an elections division, we do supply Tabor Blue Books.
Right.
Anything that the state is putting out or
Yeah.
the county is putting out, officially, we are supplying that to the jail. We're legally required to do that, so
Yeah.
we do. As well as, you know, the registration material and that. So,
We learned last November that we can't have staples in the ballot issues booklets. So now we know that.
And again, see, that speaks to
Yeah.
one of those
You know,
little security nuances there.
Who would have thought? Yeah.
And just to echo something that Ann had mentioned earlier, one of the things when you're informing the public is you have to be careful about creating the inadvertent digital divide.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, the lack of internet access, because candidates, like you said, put most of their information online.
Yeah.
To Justin's point about how things operate in different states, some states, they actually have candidates appear in their ballot issue notices. That's not the law here in Colorado. So that may be something to check out one day. Stu, how can people get to that
Yeah.
white paper? When is the actual official release date?
Let's
And
get
I've got
right
some
there.
contact information here.
So I kind of mentioned earlier that this is going to be kind of a live document. We're going to keep adding to this as we go through it, as we start figuring out in-person voting better and more. We've done some election days out and we want to add to that calendar. But anyway, we should have links out, hopefully with this Facebook post. Yes, yeah. We can, I'm sure, get this out on our website, easily findable. And I imagine we're going to do a press release at some point. So
Exactly. All those will be forthcoming.
we're going to put it into a PDF and we're going to put it as many places as we can.
Sweet. So everyone can take about 15, 20 seconds in your final thoughts. We'll start with Stu and work towards me, and I'll get some contact information for our organization. And again, feel free to give contact information for yours.
So we are the Denver Elections Division under the Office of the Clerk of the Quarter. And if you just go to denvervotes.org, that's our website. Otherwise, you can contact our local elector, contact us, call, email. Yeah, 311.
Mhm.
And you can go to our elections division. That'll send you to our general account. If you're interested in this, leave us a message. I'll get back to you.
With the Denver Sheriff Department, you can contact me, Andrew Jones. I can be reached at andrew.jones@denvergov.org. You can also go to the Denver Sheriff Department website, and they have some information in there. Just look under programs, and they will be able to direct you to wherever you need to go. But I am the point of contact. We have a robust or good sized programs unit, so we'll be able to help you with that as well.
Absolutely. Feel free to reach out to the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. I know that that's a mouthful. The CCJRC, go to ccjrc.org. Go to our website to learn more about the eligibility and rights for people with criminal records to vote in our state. You can find that information. If you're interested in volunteering with us, please feel free to reach out to us. You can contact our volunteer coordinator, Jasmine Ross. She's jasmine@ccjrc.org. I'm the deputy director, Justin Cooper, so you can contact me, justin@ccjrc.org. And I want to leave the audience with this. I think it's important. Colorado has an opportunity right now to really scale this work. Last year, I think it was 2019 actually, Secretary of State's office, did rulemaking 7.4 that mandated all 52 county jails actually implement a voter registration program. So Colorado is really ahead of the curve in scaling this and getting this incorporated in all the jails across our state with the support of the Secretary of State's office. It's vitally important, ladies and gentlemen, that we continue to pursue this for the health of our democracy, because it is a misbelief in our state that people with a criminal record cannot vote. And we have a constitutional, we have a responsibility, and we have a duty, state agencies, local government agencies, advocacy organizations, to ensure that all eligible voters have access to register to vote and have access to voting. And that is why we did this. That's why we started it in 2016. We'll continue to do it with the support of the leadership in the state and in the city. And we appreciate that. But feel free to reach out to us. I think that's really important for the audience to hear. And I think it's important for other states who are interested in do this to go to the link, get the white paper, and reach out to any of us. And if we can be a resource to help you get started in your state, please feel free to reach out. So thank you.
And if people have questions about how the league in various parts of the state can get involved, I'd be very happy to answer them. You can get to me through the league website, the Denver League website, and that's lwvdenver.org. Just there are places where you can ask a question. It will get to me if it's about voting in the jails.
All right, well, thank you all for that great information. And again, I'm Alton Dillard, Communications Manager for the Clerk and Recorder's Office, filling in for the Honorable Paul D. Lopez, who was under the weather and couldn't join us tonight. But again, just want to thank you all for your time. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And we're going to keep with the ongoing process improvement. That's the culture that we have here, and we're going to continue to build on this program. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your week. Everyone free to get it clear.